Hello and welcome. This is Wilrens for Create a Learning Site, the place to go deeper in your understanding of the Bible. Language is mind-bogglingly complex. It was illustrated in a small way by the strange word mind-bogglingly. The Bible is written in human language. Put those two together and what follows is, if we care about interpreting the Bible, it pays off to think about how language works. This month, therefore, I made an excursion into linguistics, the science that studies language. What I came away with is a sense of wonder. That we understand anything at all is close to a miracle. Language is complex. I use speech recognition software to write my text for Create a Learning Site, and this software takes up more resources on my computer than any other application I use, except perhaps video conversion. Its maker, a company called Nuance, has been developing and improving the software for decades. It's nevertheless the program on my computer most likely to crash. It does an okay job turning my speech into writing, but I still need to check because mistakes are common. And the program has no real understanding of what I'm writing or saying. All it does is captures the sounds and turns them into words on the screen. This is one of the hardest things for a computer to do. I realize we are moving to more advanced speech recognition in which a computer does indeed, understand what we are saying, but we're not very far yet. It's one thing for a computer to recognize a short command out of a relatively small pool of possible commands, or to understand a simple question and follow this up with an internet search. It's quite another thing to understand the content of even a simple conversation or text, let alone the allusions and undertones in a more sophisticated and subtle one. In case you haven't noticed yet, Siri does not have a sense of humor. Let me demonstrate this to you. Hey Siri, would you tell me a joke?
I don't really know any good jokes. None, in fact.
So, do you not have a sense of humor?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I can't answer that.
Siri, can you laugh?
LOL.
Siri, do you have a sense of humor?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I can't answer that.
Well, I guess not. The miracle of language, or rather of the human mind, is we process language nearly continuously, and most of the time we do this with little effort. When engaged in a conversation or reading a text, my mind processes the sounds and word symbols quite accurately and understands, with exceptions, quite well what the message of the speaker or text is. And in fact, I pick up all sorts of things besides what's actually being said. The complexity of what is going on as we listen or read is, mind-boggling. And we do it without thinking about it. Many people even understand sentences when the letters of words have been scrambled. Try that with a computer. One misspelling, you never find what you're looking for. Of course, the ease with which we process language starts breaking down once we turn to more difficult subjects and texts, especially when these are older, come from different cultures, and were originally written in a different language, such as, for instance, the Bible. So how does language work? The complexity comes in layers. We start with words. Words are the smallest units on which language is based. Most words have multiple meanings. Many of these are related, some are not. Think of the word food, for instance. How many different senses come to mind? Obviously, food as a measurement has something to do with the body part called foot, but there are two separate senses of the word. And then what about the foot of a mountain or of a statue? Now, usually the context helps us to decide which meaning is intended. Food and heard don't go together in measurements, but they do in speaking of body parts. If something is 6 foot long, we know we may ask how much that is in meters, but we also know it doesn't make sense to ask whose foot we are talking about. Now, when struggling with the meaning of words, it is crucial to keep in mind the difference between word and concept. For instance, not everything Jesus said about love, not even when he uses the Greek word agape, can be read back into the meaning of the word love. The Greek word agape does not mean selfless, sacrificial love, even though this is often claimed. Selfless, sacrificial love certainly is the kind of love Jesus seeks and spoke about and lived, but this is his concept of love, not the meaning of the word love or agape itself. This becomes especially clear when we look at other instances where the word is used in a rather different sort of conceptual sense. It's used, for instance, in the Greek translation of Isaiah 1 verse 23 for the love of a bribe. And it's used as well in Greek in 2 Samuel 13 for Amnon's love, in quotation marks, for his sister Tamar before he raped her. And then in Luke 11:43, the Pharisees love, and the verb agape is used, the best seats in the synagogues. Not exactly examples of selfless sacrificial love. Confusing word and concept is a common mistake in word studies. Paul, for instance, argues extensively about such concepts as baptism and justification, going far beyond the mere sense of the words. The word justification or baptism or salvation does not mean everything Paul says about the respective concept. A different way to give a name to this distinction is to speak of lexical sense, with an S of course. That's the definition we expect to find in a dictionary, and context sense. That's the special and expanded meaning that a particular word as a subject acquires in a particular text or conversation. In this connection, it is worth talking about semantic fields or domains, a fascinating development in the science of linguistics. Semantics is the study of the meaning of words. That's why this is called a semantic field. And the concept stands for a group of words that are related in meaning. This opens an alternative way of thinking about the meaning of words, different from the common and more traditional approach of defining words. It's quite difficult to accurately and fully define the sense of a word so that the definition covers every possible instance. Think about it. What exactly makes a vase a vase? Or a shirt a shirt? Must a shirt have sleeves? Must it have a collar? Buttons? How many? Can it be made of plastic or only of specific materials? It's often easier to place a word alongside related words, words that are similar and partially overlap, especially also words that are mutually exclusive, and then words that are larger categories and include the word we are interested in. To make this concrete, a vase is not normally a cup, but it can be a jug. All three words are examples of containers of sorts. voila, our semantic field. A shirt is an item of clothing, as are trousers or pants, depending on where you're from, t-shirts, and skirts and many more. Other examples of semantic fields would be different kinds of food, colors, or different verbs for motions, such as walk, run, drive, sail, fly, and so on. This is really how we learned the meaning of words as children, not by hearing a definition, but by picking up the differences between related words in everyday use. We know a color is neither green nor blue, but turquoise, precisely because it is neither of the other two, but yet something close to them. It's not because we can define what turquoise looks like. In every language, these semantic fields form a hierarchical web of meaning in relation of words in relation to other words. This way of looking at word meaning is very helpful in translation work. It enables the translator to compare options that are available to translate a term. The application to Bible translation is obvious, and organizations like Wycliffe Bible Translators and the United Bible Societies work extensively with this concept of semantic fields. Okay, time to move on to the next layer of language, sentences. We apply, in speaking or writing, or reading and listening, the rules of grammar, usually intuitively, to combine words into sentences and to make sense of what we hear or read. And if we're the sender, the speaker or writer, then we hope that someone else will understand what we're putting together. Look at the example of a sentence here. Yesterday, a green tiredness will eat so that he will write. That is complete nonsense because the words don't match and the grammar is wrong. Tiredness is not green, does not eat. The verb tenses don't fit. It doesn't follow from eating that someone who would be right. This is completely unintelligible. Normally, however, we can assume that there is a sense in a text, even if it is not immediately clear. And in this case, we wrestle with the meaning of words and with the grammar in an attempt to get the sentence. This is where a Bible commentary can be useful. These first two levels of language, words and sentences, they are the focus of most commentaries. They wrestle with word meaning, which sense exactly does the word have in this context, and with grammar. What is the sense of the sentence? How do its parts connect and build meaning? There is an unfortunate side to this because it leaves so much out. It neglects the levels above sentence. Paragraphs or units of thoughts, higher level units of thoughts, and then the text as a whole. And I'm going to use the word discourse for this. Newer commentaries do tend to do better, even if not all, but there still is room for improvement. After all, once we understand the words and the sentences, it's not at all guaranteed that we have understood the message or the argument, or may actually not have understood it at all. There is a need then to move beyond the sentence level. We must consider these higher levels of any text. How do sentences combine into paragraphs, into larger units? How do these combine to form a complete text or discourse? It is the subject of a relatively new approach in biblical studies to look at it this way, called Discourse Analysis. Now, discourse in this technical sense does not necessarily mean something verbal. Any unit of communication, including a written text, is a discourse in this sense. Discourse analysis seeks to understand how the sentences and larger units combine in order to comprehend the meaning of the discourse in a larger sense, that is, its message. What is the message? This requires a higher level of grammar that we call discourse grammar. It describes how sentences may combine and how an argument can be built. It considers things like structure, principles of organization in a text, structural indicators or markers such as a summary statement, a conclusion, a rhetorical question. If you've done the School of Biblical Studies or the Bible Core course, this will probably begin to sound familiar to you, even if you've never heard the term discourse analysis. SBS and BCC have always trained students to look for the big picture of a book, to pay attention to connectives, those small words like because, but, if, so that, therefore. These are the words that actually connect the sentences. We have learned to ask why often. Why does the author write this? Because it leads us to the bigger purpose of a text, to the point the author wants to make. We have struggled to follow Paul's train of thought in a letter, or to find the overall message of a historical narrative, such as Acts or Judges. In other words, we have engaged in discourse analysis, probably without knowing it. Only when we see how all the parts connect and fit together, what the point or purpose of each sentence and paragraph is, and how all of this relates to the situation in which the author was writing, do we begin to fully comprehend the meaning of a discourse, that is, a book of the Bible. It is a life-changing experience, but it can only happen if we give language its due and wrestle with its, here comes that word again, mind-boggling complexities.
The show will be starting in just a few moments. Thank you for your patience. The show will be starting in just a few moments. Thank you for your patience.